I said from day one, I don't start tariff wars, but if one begins, we're going to win it. Canada has always been a tough negotiator, but the truth is the United States holds the overwhelming leverage. Every key card is in Washington's hands. We don't want to create unnecessary damage, but economically, America's power over Canada is undeniable. Even U.S. states like Kentucky are feeling the pressure. Its governor has privately urged the White House to de-escalate as industries at home panic over lost access to Canadian markets. Across the border, however, Canadians are uniting in defiance. "I have never been prouder to say I am Canadian," said one Ontario worker, even as projections warn the province could lose hundreds of thousands of jobs this decade under Trump's tariff regime. In a high-stakes response, Ontario has halted U.S. access to a multi-billion-dollar clean energy partnership, an unprecedented move that has left Washington furious. The timing is critical. The global race for clean energy dominance is accelerating. While the U.S. scrambles to contain the fallout, Europe has already advanced, locking in a $20 billion battery deal that experts say could define energy geopolitics for decades. Insiders describe Ontario's decision as a defining statement of energy independence and a major setback for America's electric vehicle and battery ambitions. This is not simply a trade dispute. It is a struggle over who will dominate the future of clean technology. By excluding the United States, Ontario has signaled a fundamental realignment of global partnerships. If this is the dawn of a new energy era, Ontario has drawn the first battle line. Canada's industrial heartland has locked down exports and redirected a $20 billion EV battery deal to Europe, deliberately cutting Washington out. In Washington, the move caught leaders off guard. Publicly, the White House stayed silent, but privately, officials warned this could mark the start of a larger economic rupture. Former allies were transforming into rivals, with global clean tech investment flows shifting across the Atlantic. On the ground in U.S. manufacturing hubs, factories braced for disruption. Supply chains dependent on Canadian energy and foreign components faced the prospect of sudden shortages. The headline, "Ontario cuts off U.S., Europe seizes $20 billion battery jackpot," was more than a story. It was a warning. The standoff escalated in early 2025 when the U.S. doubled tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to 50%, hitting even its closest partners. Roughly a quarter of America's steel is imported, with Canada as the single largest supplier. Trump announced the hike at a Pennsylvania steel plant, presenting it as a victory for U.S. workers. In reality, it intensified a trade war that now threatens to reshape the global economy. Canada's Chamber of Commerce condemned the tariffs, warning they threatened decades of integrated North American supply chains. Anger spread quickly among U.S. allies. Australia's trade minister called the move unjustified and damaging to trust, while the European Union vowed retaliation. But Canada responded with action, not words. On March 10th, Ontario imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States, an unprecedented step that turned a stable cross-border energy trade into a geopolitical bargaining chip. Power lines that once quietly delivered affordable electricity became tools of economic pressure. The surcharge added about $7 per megawatt hour, costing U.S. consumers an extra $277,000 per day, roughly $69 more each month for 1.5 million households and businesses. Ontario Premier Doug Ford defended the measure as a necessary counterstrike, calling Trump's tariffs a disaster for the U.S. economy and vowing to use every tool available until the trade threats were lifted. Ontario's grid is a critical supplier to regions including upstate New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Officials warned they were prepared to raise the surcharge further, or even suspend exports entirely, if Washington escalated. The message was clear. U.S. access to Canadian power could no longer be taken for granted. The impact was immediate. Ontario had exported roughly 12 million megawatt-hours of electricity to the U.S. the previous year, a supply that now carried a steep premium. American lawmakers, including New York's governor and a senior senator, denounced the tariffs as reckless. They highlighted the irony that the tariff rules were written so vaguely, no one could confirm whether electricity imports were officially covered. Yet Ontario's surcharge forced utilities to pay regardless. Michigan regulators raised concerns over pricing and grid stability. Although the state produced most of its electricity domestically, officials admitted the tariff conflict risked destabilizing the wider North American energy market. Some utilities even considered itemizing Trump tariff surcharges on customer bills to highlight the direct cost of trade policy. In New England, grid operators warned that higher duties on Canadian electricity would drive up prices and disrupt regional power flows. They pressed Washington for clarity. Instead, Ontario escalated with a pointed warning. If the U.S. weaponized trade, Canada could quite literally dim American cities. "We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans," Prime Minister Mark Carney told Parliament, "and preparing retaliatory measures if talks fail." Then came the shock that rattled Washington. A $20 billion deal sealed by Volkswagen to build one of the world's largest EV battery plants in Ontario. Every unit produced was destined for Europe, with none allocated to the U.S. The new Volkswagen plant in St. Thomas, Ontario, covers 370 acres and is designed to produce up to 1 million EV batteries annually, the largest automotive investment in Canadian history. Europe's largest car maker bypassed U.S. sites, lured by Canadian subsidies and direct access to critical mineral reserves. At the groundbreaking, Ontario officials celebrated outcompeting hundreds of international bids. But the strategic message was unmistakable. Every battery produced would be shipped to Europe, none to the United States. What began as a North American EV supply chain has shifted into a transatlantic system. For U.S. automakers already grappling with shortages, this was not just symbolic, it was a major strategic blow. Just across the river from Detroit, Windsor is constructing another EV battery facility, a joint venture between Stellantis and South Korea's LG Energy. Global automakers are increasingly positioning Canada as their hub. Germany's BASF has purchased land in Quebec for a battery materials plant. Norway's VOD has partnered with GM for mineral supply and is scouting Canadian sites. From Amsterdam to Oslo, investment capital is flooding into Canada. Investors cite stability and long-term policy certainty in Ottawa, contrasting sharply with the volatility of Washington. Even Japan is recalibrating strategy, with British Columbia courting Asian firms in batteries and green hydrogen. For over a century, Canada's industrial base fed directly into U.S. supply chains. That era is ending. Ontario's factories are now aligning with EU regulatory standards, not American ones. The gravitational pull of the U.S. market is no longer decisive. Canada is diversifying aggressively, and no sector is considered untouchable. Canada's economic map is being redrawn before our eyes. For over a century, the United States was the anchor, the destination for Canadian goods, and the partner in every major trade route. But that era is slipping away. Ottawa is making it clear. Survival means diversification, even if it means breaking old habits and alliances. Factories once designed to serve U.S. consumers are now shifting to European standards. Investments once tied to American demand are being redirected toward Asia, Africa, and beyond. The question is no longer whether Canada can afford to turn away from the United States, it's whether it can afford not to. The world is changing, and Canada is determined not to be left behind. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the shifting balance of global trade. Until next time, stay informed, stay prepared.